Welcome to Crime, Corrections, and Culture. I'm your host, Michael Liebowitz, finishing up with Brent McCall in my book, Down the Rabbit Hole, How the Culture of Corrections Encourages Crime. Persephone's got the questions all lined up. I'm going to turn it over to her. She can do the advertisements as well.
So the advertisements are, please go and follow us on Twitch. Also, please go and listen to these episodes on Spotify. Crime, Corrections and Culture, Everyday Ethics, and The Capitalist Corner are all available on Spotify. So please go and listen and leave a rating. And again, please follow us on Twitch. It's extremely helpful to us. So yeah, we're discussing the last chapter of the book, which is Reforming the Reformers, which starts with another story of just how bad these people are at being role models, being good at rehabilitating people. And it is when there was an unannounced OSHA inspection, and Casey and Cheeman were completely caught off guard, and they sent one of the guys to go and fetch the saw safety guards from the warehouse where they hadn't been used. And when the OSHA guy got there, they were like, "Oh no, we put the guards like on and take them off as needed." And then when he was like, "Okay, we'll put them on," they couldn't do it. They were like, because they'd never done it before. So, but when they were caught out, the immediate instinct wasn't like, "Oh well, in future we'll be better." It was, "No, we're just gonna lie and cover this up and do everything we can to evade responsibility."
Yeah.
So this is like the running theme. Obviously, the whole point of one of the points is that the people who are supposed to be helping to rehabilitate you are basically criminals themselves, and everything that you see in prison is just driving you towards, well, crime does pay, you just have to do it right.
Yeah.
But also, so in this chapter you say that the one complaint, or the common official complaint, is nothing works, right? And obviously that's not true. There are things that work, but you go on to say that even the programs as they are laid out, as they are supposed to be, though the prisons don't follow the programs as they're supposed to be, at the directives, even if they were followed to the letter, there's still two major flaws, right?
Okay.
Okay. So the one is the lack of integration.
Yes.
So the programming happens that teaches the criminals that they're victims of social injustice, and that undermines custody's role. Custody staff mock the programs, and then the COs say like rehabilitation is someone else's problem. So all
Yes.
of these things are like working against each other.
Right. So I want to back up a little bit. So you said nothing works. So in the 70s, there was a guy named Robert Martinson who wrote a paper that largely concluded that nothing works. Turns out that the paper was, the studies that he did were full of methodological flaws. These have been pointed out. Subsequent studies have shown that indeed there are things that work when it comes to rehabilitating criminals. Anybody that wants to, you can go look up Robert Martinson, look up who he is, what he did. He subsequently kind of recanted. There's an abundance of evidence for the types of programs that do work, do help to reduce recidivism. I would recommend, in addition to Stanton Saminow, looking up the risk-need responsivity model of corrections of rehabilitation. Okay, that's it. So prison is, you have custody and you have programming. Custody is basically They're responsible for safety and security of the institution. Programming is just what you would think. It's, to help, supposed to help rehabilitate offenders. The programming is garbage by and large, but let's not get to that just yet. There's a separation in prison between programming and custody, such that custody doesn't view its role to have anything to do with rehabilitation. They don't see themselves as modeling behavior. They don't see themselves as enforcing the rules in such a way as to deter criminal behavior. They just see themselves as they're basically guards, for lack of a better word, by and large. Now, when I say that, sometimes they don't even really, they don't even really view themselves as that. They're just there to get a paycheck. But that is the distinction. So what Brent and I argued was the two need to be integrated so that you can satisfy the corrections goals of incapacitation, punishment, deterrence, and rehabilitation, so that the whole thing is going in the same direction. Custody is not acting in ways that are detrimental to the rehabilitative process, but also programming ought not to be teaching the offenders that they're victims of an unjust society, thus making custody's job more difficult.
Yeah, but I mean, also, besides just like the programming and custody having to work together, the people who are responsible for both or for everything also shouldn't be criminals themselves and shouldn't be
Right.
modeling behavior that is terrible.
Right. They should be exhibiting and modeling responsible pro-social behaviors, the very types of behaviors they want the offender population to adopt.
So there was another story that you mentioned, which was about a Prison Rape Elimination Act inspector, where a CO actually announced over the housing block speaker that lieutenants were coming. And
They do that all the time. Whenever lieutenants tour in the prison, the calls go out to the blocks to tell the officers that the lieutenants will be coming around.
so they're actively like, so you say smoking is a Class A offense, which had
Yeah.
serious penalties.
Yeah.
So not only was this a rule that they didn't care to enforce.
What was the rule exactly? Can you remind me?
I can't. Hold on. Let me see if I can find it. So, not only, according to directives, smoking is a Class A offense, punishable by punitive segregation, forfeiture of good time, or RREC, and
Yes.
two different penalties, such as loss of commissary and loss of mail. So, So the announcement went out. Whoever's smoking needs to put it out because lieutenants are coming. So
Okay.
so this was a serious thing. Smoking was a serious thing. It wasn't just like
No, Class
you
A
shouldn't.
offenses are the worst. So fighting, assault, all those are Class A offenses. Doing drugs, smoking pot, whatever, Class A offenses.
So this was a rule. It was a serious rule that had serious consequences. Not only did the staff not care that the people were breaking it, but when they did come close to getting caught, then they put out announcements to go, you're about to get caught doing something that you shouldn't. You might want to stop so that you don't get caught.
Right.
How is that supposed to teach them two things? How is that supposed to teach them not to break the rules? And like, was that ever, like, were those things ever enforced? Like the not smoking.
Yeah, serious stuff like smoking, fighting, that type of stuff is normally enforced. But gambling, for instance, is not. Very, very rarely enforced. Gambling is, not something they care much about. And sometimes even fighting wouldn't be, but in this situation, the CO may just not want to have to write the ticket because he's lazy. He doesn't want to have to do paperwork. Maybe he doesn't want the lieutenant to chew him out for why there's smoking going on in his block. But yeah, that type of thing happens all the time.
So you said corrections personnel show themselves daily to be unconcerned with exhibiting the honesty, integrity, responsibility, and respect for authority they're supposed to be trying to impress upon offenders in their custody.
Right.
I mean, that's the core of it. They're teaching you through their behavior that those things aren't necessary. But
Yeah.
they then expect do but that's the thing. Do they expect you to come out of prison better than you went in? Or
Who?
is the
Well,
is
who is the they that you're talking about?
well, just the people, the staff in general.
No, the
I mean,
staff. No.
you said
By
there
and
were you
large, the
said there were a
staff no.
couple.
By and large, the staff no. But they attribute that all to the offenders. They don't see their role in that. When I was discharging from prison, getting out of prison, I was walking out the door, and it was November 28th, 2022. The correctional officer that I walked by said, "Oh, out for Christmas, be back by New Year." That's the attitude they take. Now, that same officer, he had previously gotten upset with me for doing interviews on the radio. And I stopped and I talked to him. And I said, "So what should I do? Should the public just not know what you guys do? That you sleep on the job, for instance? Should they not know that?
Well,
Should you,
no.
it's absurd."
But how do they not see that what they're doing is detrimental, is bad, is modeling the
Well,
exact kind of behavior that you don't want criminals to have?
well, that requires self-awareness. It requires a desire to be better, and it requires intelligence, quite frankly. And a lot of them just don't have these things.
So this is what I mean when I say, like, I knew it was going to be bad, but it's just so much worse. So um so that was the one thing. The first flaw that you identify is the disintegration, and you suggested eliminating the custody treatment divide
Yeah.
entirely, but also the training model, which is 5 to 6 weeks of training.
Yeah, yeah. And it's funny because the warden, not the warden, the commissioner at the time, his name was Scott Semple. So a bunch of these guys went over to Germany and studied the German model of corrections. The German model of corrections was featured on 60 Minutes, so we knew what it was. So they subsequently implement this thing they call the True Unit in Cheshire, and they say it's based on that. What? The staff are not getting 2 years of training like in the German model. They're not being trained in psychology so that they can deal better with the inmates. That's what happens with the German model. But yet they claim that they, were basing this on the German model. So yeah, 5 to 6 weeks in the academy is not enough, period.
But I mean, it's kind of, it's also like the ICE agents. They don't get a huge amount of training, and then they're sent out to.
Okay, I don't want to go into that,
No,
though.
I know. I was just saying. So that was the first flaw, the disintegration. And then the second flaw is the perverse incentives, which again is just everywhere.
Right. I mean, the perverse incentives are if you go along to get along, you can prosper. If you buck the system and try to do what's right, you're going to suffer. And if you're an inmate and you just go along to get along, you'll be okay. As long as you're not sniffing dope in the block, on the table or, fighting in the open, by and large, you'll go along to get along. But when you try to do what's right, you end up in conflict with everybody around you as an inmate, both staff and the other inmates. What Brent and I discovered, and what a lot of the inmates and the staff would not want to really understand, is they, by and large, are on the same team. And what I mean by that is that in the ordinary course of events, there's almost a implicit contract maybe between staff and inmates that we're going to allow a certain amount of fuckery to go on around here, and if you don't make waves, everybody gets along. So the inmates get to do their gambling tickets, play poker, engage in all kinds of loud debates and discussions, slam their dominoes, and nobody's going to bother them. And the COs get to sit behind the bubble, bullshit, and, talk about nonsense. And as long as there's not an extreme disruption in this where, the inmates, like I said, are fighting or doing drugs out in the open, or if the staff aren't, hindering inmates from going to the gym or going outside or mess up a legal call, then the normal flow goes. And everybody has a vested interest in the status quo. And that's what you get. The inmates don't want to be held accountable, and the staff don't want to hold them accountable. So it works on that level for everybody involved, except for the inmates who actually want to do better with their lives and the public who are paying the bills.
Yeah, because what happens is you go in, you come out no better or likely worse than you were when you went in. And then they're still saying, oh, well, we want there to be lower recidivism, but you're doing nothing to actually move in that direction.
Yeah. So you have to understand something about this book that I really, really want people to understand something here. Brent and I were meticulous in dates, times, and places of when this stuff occurred. Named names, a lot of them. If we had lied, they could have sued us for libel. They could have written us up and given us disciplinary reports. I've thrown it out there, I don't know how many times, on the most popular talk show in the state at the time, the Todd Feinberg Show, that I would debate any of them. I'll still say that. I'll debate any of them. I've told particular staff members, we can debate the issue. They don't. When the book was going in and out, when we were editing and whatnot, all of a sudden we didn't get the materials, and we're wondering, oh, something's up because it's not coming in the mail. It had been intercepted by staff. The lieutenant called Brent down there and told Brent, look, we sent this to our legal department and had them review it. We wanted to just put you in seg and threaten you that you better not do this, but the legal department told us we could not do that. We cannot prevent you from writing this book. But if you leak any of this information to the other inmates, you will go to seg for it. So Brent agreed. I didn't, but Brent knew, obviously, if he's agreeing for me as well. So if we were lying, believe me, they did not want this book coming out. We Subby hand-delivered a copy to the Commissioner of Corrections. If we were lying, they would have called us out for it. More to the point, while Brent and I kept our word and didn't leak the information, the staff did leak the information when it was convenient for them, often giving half-truths and flat-out lying to the inmates in an attempt to get us beat up. And we still didn't say anything, even with that. Now, at that point, morally, I would have said, you know what? They didn't keep their end of the bargain. I'm not accountable for it. But I said to myself, you know what? I'm going to demonstrate, and so did Brent, that it's the two convicted felons who will keep their word in this regard, even when the corrupt staff don't.
Yeah, I mean, you are a much better person than what I gather a lot of these dudes were.
Oh, yeah. No doubt about it.
Which is wild if you think about it, because shouldn't
is.
the people who are responsible for you, shouldn't they be role models?
They should. They should.
So you also talk about that it's no different in private prisons.
Right. Now, there's a clear a distinction needs to be explained here. When we say private prisons, right? Because a private business normally goes into business to make profit, so they produce the best results that they can, so that they can outcompete other companies or whatever. The private prisons in America, unless it's changed, which it could have. I don't keep up with it every day, but back then the way that private prisons were reimbursed was based on the amount of offenders they housed. Because previously they got reimbursed no matter what, and people were like, what the hell? Why are you paying them for all these empty beds? So then they changed it to pay them based on the people that they actually house. Now, if you are paying a company based on the amount of people that are in their prisons, the incentive is to not rehabilitate them because you want them to stay in your prisons. Whether or not that actually happens, or it's in their minds, or if it's subconscious, I don't know. I just know that there's a perverse incentive. Now, if you juxtapose that with the company called Serco out of the UK, they also operate in Australia and New Zealand, at least they used to. They award bonuses based on results. In other words, based on drops in recidivism. So now the incentive is switched. You're not being incentivized based on the amount of people you hold. You're you're reimbursed based on the inmates that are actually rehabilitated. Now, I don't know all the ins and outs of Serco, but the basic model where you would reimburse staff based on productive results for the society, people that actually pay the bills, I think is a much better way to go than either paying them for nothing or paying them based on the amount of inmates that are housed there.
Yeah. So, I mean, you do in here, you do say, to be clear, we're not suggesting that high rates of recidivism are a consciously pursued goal on
No,
anyone's part. We don't see the problem as a nefarious conspiracy.
no.
What we are saying is that people respond to the way in which things are incentivized, and the present arrangement is tantamount to disincentivizing the development or implementation of any meaningful strategies to reduce the rate of recidivism. In short, the policy of paying prison staff regardless of results breeds apathy, and that's
Yeah,
probably the biggest problem. Not that there's
yeah.
some like horrible
No,
conspiracy,
and
just that
especially right.
they don't give a fuck.
You have that, and then you put them a union to protect them. So there's no incentive to do well, and you have a union that will protect you when you do bad. They all know that. So now if you are a correctional officer and you come in and start wanting to enforce the rules, go by the book, you are not going to last in the prison system.
So you said, how hard do you imagine for a moment if car salesmen were paid, even if they never sold any cars? How hard do you think they would work to make sales if they had job security and a steady income stream, even though they didn't get positive results? Well, when it comes to corrections, the practice is even worse because the arrangement actually promotes behaviors antithetical to public interest. To prison staff, to pay prison staff regardless of the results that they produce is ultimately to endanger public safety.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which, again, like makes this so much worse because I don't know, to me it's insane. Not just if they were just sort of apathetic, it would be different, but for them to actively go out of their way to, like, say, oh, a lieutenant's coming, put out your cigarettes, when that's like a serious offense,
Yeah.
to encourage shitty behavior, to encourage criminal thinking,
Oh, sure. That's even worse. Yeah.
to commit crimes themselves and make the inmates complicit in their crimes, to defraud the government. Like it's just so much worse than you think it's going to be. So you, as part of the solution that you proposed, you said that should be a results-based compensation model
Yeah.
tied to three outcomes: preventing escapes, which
Yeah.
feels obvious, maintaining safety and security, and reducing recidivism.
Yeah.
So scaling employee bonuses with recidivism reductions. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I think so.
You'd think that that would be kind of like an obvious thing, but apparently not.
Yeah. Yeah. Apparently not.
So You also say oftentimes the inverted incentives extend to the compensation corrections personnel can potentially receive in retirement. In Connecticut, CO pensions are determined by the employee's 3 highest earning years.
Yes.
So pensions are a percentage of the average of those 3 years. Consequently, in an effort to pad their pensions, there is a conscious effort on the part of the COs in Connecticut to work as much overtime as they can for 3 solid years.
Yeah.
And it seems clear that the greater the prison population, the greater the opportunities for overtime. Thus, the incentive is to root for higher inmate populations. Terrible.
Terrible is right.
Anyway, this is, again, like, what else can you say other than it's terrible?
Just that I would encourage everybody to actually look into the prison system, actually learn a little bit about criminal thinking, and the results that are coming out of it. I mean, reading down the rabbit hole would be an awesome first step. Of course, I have a selfish motive to have people read it, but nevertheless, I think it's a great book, and I think it's well worth the read, and I think you will definitely come out better informed about the correctional system than you previously were. I think, Persephone, did you post yet the review from Dr. Samanow and from Don Pesci? No?
No. I will do that directly after this. I
All
will
right.
go, I will do that.
Okay, that's great. But
So,
yeah, I mean, like, it's just, yeah, I want people to understand something. Like, we covered it, but, on the show, obviously, but we couldn't cover every single example in the book. For instance, the female staff member who was fond of meowing over the intercom, and telling dirty jokes with inmates. Like that's one example. Or, there was the CO who warned when the lockdown was coming so everybody could get rid of their stuff. There's COs on their phones all the time. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that we just, this is a show, not a book. Read the book.
yeah, I highly encourage everybody to read the book. I don't have a selfish reason for telling you to read the book. I thought it was horrible, but in a very
Thank you.
informative, well-written, obviously it was a good book, which feels weird to say. It's kind of like getting hit in the face with a shovel, but it's a very good book, and I highly encourage that everybody read it. It's very informative. It's horrible. But yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of things that we didn't talk about, but the main thing that you see repeated over and over and over again is that the programming is actively harmful sometimes or useless. The staff don't give enough of a shit, and when that's not the case, they're actively encouraging criminal behavior or behaving like criminals themselves. And those are the two main things that you see just repeated over and over and over again in different forms.
Yes. So my question for you, Persephone, is when we come back on Friday, what are we going to be doing?
So on Friday, I have a whole bunch of questions. We went the book is only 6 chapters
Right.
and an introduction, so 7 chapters, and we sort of motored through the book quite quickly.
Yes.
So on Friday, I have a whole bunch of questions that either like never made it in or that I didn't really have
Oh,
time to ask.
okay.
So I have questions, but I'm also hoping that everybody who has been listening, maybe they have additional questions as well. So that is the goal for Friday. And then from next week, we're going to be discussing Inside the Criminal Mind.
Awesome. That is fantastic. I cannot wait. All right, everybody, we're going to wrap up. We will be back on Friday, 3:15 p.m. Eastern Time, special day, because tomorrow I have somewhere to be. I thank you all so much for joining us. please continue to do so. Goodbye.
Bye.